Welcome to Ask Sean, where I explore all sorts of questions about life, relationships, and being human. I'm Sean Slevin, a licensed professional counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist. And if you have a question for me, you could submit that anonymously at asksean.org. So I want to talk about niceness. I had a conversation with a dear friend recently, and they were sharing about their own therapy, kind of some things that are coming up for them, and just really struggling with some emotions, some feelings that they were getting more honest about, and the ways in which these feelings felt really ugly. And they were feeling really ugly. They were feeling ashamed. At points in our conversation, they're like, oh, I feel like I need to throw up, or I want to throw up, or whatever. And I could really relate. I have my own history, my own struggles with trying so hard to be nice, like working so hard to be good in like kind of the nice kind of way or whatever, like be a nice person, be a nice little boy when I was growing up, be a nice man as an adult. And in my own journey, much like with my friend, like as I started to get more honest about, like, sometimes I feel ugly things, sometimes I feel thoughts and emotions that feel shameful, that feel unacceptable, that feel gross, feel disgusting, whatever. Like it really threatened, like, but I'm nice. I need to be a nice person. I need to be a nice person. And as my friend was saying, they were like, I don't feel nice right now. And as I've also, said at points in my own therapy, and just the huge sort of crisis that creates. And so like one of the things I was saying to my friend, and that I've learned to believe for myself, and that I believe for all of us, is that we are so much more than our niceness. And so I want to unpack this. Like, what does it mean that you are more than your niceness? So I start by just like, we need to kind of make sense of what do we mean by being nice. And I'm using nice in a particular way here, right? So the word itself is fine. Like you could define the word nice differently, and that would be fine too. So, like, this is just a way of distinguishing different states of being. And so, so this is the language that I have, that kind of I've adopted. But in a different conversation, I might use nice in a different way. And so, there's nothing sacred about, using this word. You could have a different word. So at niceness, how I'm thinking about it here in the context of these kinds of psychological processes is this pattern of being, this pattern of relating, where we're preoccupied with being acceptable, with being good enough, with not offending, even like not doing harm can fall into this, which we should seek to not do harm, right? But there can be this way of pursuing all these things that's really rooted in a deep insecurity. For me, this comes from the little boy in me, the wounded little boy that growing up, adopted unconsciously, right? Because we're not sophisticated, cognitively when we're little, but unconsciously I adopted this survival strategy of I'll be the good little boy, and then they'll love me. I thought maybe. And so this persisted, this through line, like this, is under the surface, right, into adulthood. And so I keep trying to be the nice man and being nice to people in different ways and different contexts. And the thing is, it kind of works, right? Particularly because the good side of niceness is when we're actually being kind, right? And that would be I guess, sort of a word I'm going to use in kind of distinction with niceness. But true kindness is not preoccupied with like upsetting people, right? Kindness is, I want to treat people well because people deserve to be treated well. They're fellow humans, and they have dignity, and they have worth. And that's just a good thing to do. It's the right thing to do. It's the moral thing, the ethical thing, the the spiritually right thing before God. So like all those kinds of motivations, right? Regardless of whether you're coming from a spiritual context, religious context. I'm just saying it's like kindness is motivated by like, I'm doing this because I think it's good and it's right, not because I'm deeply afraid of being seen as bad, right? Do you see the distinction there? Like niceness, the way that I'm using it in contrast here, right? Because again, you could use the word niceness and it could in a fine way, and that's okay. But in the way I'm using it here in contrast, niceness is coming from this ultimately this fearful place of, I'm not sure that I am going to be loved or that I have worth or that I will be accepted. But something in me learned a long time ago that maybe if I can try to be nice enough, then people won't be upset at me, or maybe they'll accept me. Maybe they'll like me. Maybe they'll love me. And if I'm not nice enough, then I'm definitely going to lose all those things. I won't be loved. I'll be disliked. I'll be hated. I'll be attacked. I'll be cast out. Whatever the particular things are. And so part of the ugliness that my friend was reckoning with, and that I've had to reckon with, is that deep down, this is kind of a manipulation. Now, it's a manipulation that comes from a place of trying to survive. Like, it's not a manipulation that's seeking to harm, right? And it's a manipulation that does lead us often to do good behaviors, right? And to adopt at least things on the surface are good ways of behaving, even if it's complicated and mixed internally, right? So, but it's like, it can be gut-wrenchingly, like, humbling and kind of sickening to be like, holy shit, this, like, fundamental way of, like, how I am doing life isn't as pure as I thought, right? Like, it's not as clean and innocent and other-centered as I thought. In fact, it's quite ego-centered, like in the sense that, in the psychological sense that it's quite preoccupied with, please like me, please tell me I'm a good person, please don't be upset at me, please don't tell me I'm bad, a bad, Republican or Democrat or independent, or a bad Christian or Muslim, or whatever, if you're have a faith context, whatever your faith context might be, right? Like, it's this deep fear of of failing and of being found out and being cast out. So the reason that we are so much more than our niceness is that this ultimately isn't us, right? Like, this is a strategy. This is a way of trying to survive. And so it is very vulnerable and very scary, and it feels super threatening to start to realize, to kind of have the lights coming on inside of like, holy shit, like I'm not as clean as I thought, like I'm not as pure as I thought. And in fact, sometimes I like hate people, and sometimes like I'm furious with them. I don't want to punch them in the face or whatever, right? Like, these feelings that we all have in some kind of way or another. Like things that we would be terrified for anybody to know, right? And yet they're in there. And so then this brings us then to this question of like, okay, so if we are more than our niceness, and like we actually do have like these difficult to accept feelings inside of us, then so then like, okay, where do we go with this, right? Like, if the answer isn't to pretend the difficult feelings aren't there by covering them with this sort of veneer of niceness, so this is kind of a suppression, right? If the answer isn't suppression and pretending, is the answer then, well, okay, if I'm feeling like, like if I want to cuss somebody out, and those are the feelings and that I'm having, and the ugly feelings I'm having, should I just go ahead and do that, right? If I want to punch somebody in the face, should I just go ahead and punch them in the face, right? Whatever the ugly feelings are, if I'm disgusted with someone, or I'm hating somebody, or fed up with them, or the other political party, or whatever, like whatever the thing is, like, is if the answer isn't niceness, should I just give myself over to my ugly feelings? And this is a real question in our culture, because a lot of people do this. There's, in the name of authenticity, a lot of people will sort of live into sort of their ugly feelings and just be like, well, I'm just telling the truth. I just tell it like it is, and if you can't handle it, then fuck you, kind of thing. And so, of course, I mean, as you can imagine, or if you've listened to me before, like, I don't think that's the answer either, right? In a sense, that is just the other extreme. Like, we have both of these in our culture, right? Like, we have niceness and we have meanness, and they're really two sides of the same coin. And here's the thing, like, neither one is actually being with the difficult emotion, the so-called ugly emotion, in a constructive way. Because the ugly emotions in us, they do need to be felt, and we need to be honest about them, what we're about having them. And kind of like a child having a temper tantrum, it's not helpful to the ugly emotion to let it totally rule, right? Like if a child's having a temper tantrum and they're like, they just want to like push lamps off of tables and like break all the dishes, like it doesn't help the child to let them do all of that. Like that's not helping them get back to a grounded, regulated place. That's not actually helping them metabolize the emotions, because what's happening there is actually an inability to really be with the underlying emotion, and so their system is freaking the fuck out. And so in a similar way, kind of in an analogous way, like giving ourselves over to our ugly emotions and letting that sort of define us, like if I'm in a foul mood, letting that kind of take over and be like, okay, well, that's the totality of where I am. That's being disconnected, for one thing, from the rest of my system, the parts of me that are kind, and do want to treat people well and do value my fellow human beings and value myself as a fellow human. So it's being disconnected from the rest of me. But it's also like it's not helping the foul mood to work through, right? It's just kind of a set of saying, okay, I'm just going to camp out here, right? And just get stuck. And it's like, well, we can do that. And like, I've done that in places in my life and in my journey. And that we see many examples of that in our culture where folks are really kind of being eaten up by a bitterness and a resentment and a judgmentalness. We see this across the spectrum. Like this is not particular to any political party or socioeconomic class or anything. Because in some ways, again, this is just the polar opposite of niceness. It's sort of like, well, niceness didn't work, so I'm going to be a fucking asshole and see how that works, right? And on the surface, again, that can sort of initially it can seem like that's being more honest and being more authentic. And so it seems like a move towards something better. But I'm trying to think I'm searching for more words. Like wanting a way of describing this, like part of what I was saying to my friend, and this was drawing from my own experience with myself, is that we need to be able to look these ugly feelings, these ugly thoughts and feelings, ugly impulses. We need to be able to look them in the face. Not pretend that there isn't some ugliness there, because there is. And yet, like, be willing to sit down with this ugly emotion and be like, okay, tell me what's really going on. Like, I know you want to cuss out, fill in the blank, your family member, your partner, your child, your boss, your teacher. And like, you hate them so much right now. Like, what's really happening here? Like, why? Like, tell me more about why you hate them so much. Tell me more about what hurts so much that feels like the only emotion, the only response that feels right in this moment. Can you start to get the feel of like how powerful that can be? Like if a fellow human does that, this is a lot of what I do in therapy with people, right? Like they come in and they they've got stuff going up all over the place, right? Emotions coming out this way and that way, or maybe they've been trying to keep contained, and then emotions start popping out as we start relating. And just because it's my nature to be drawn to these places and people, which is why my friend and I had this conversation, and my friend knew they could bring these things out with me. And I did look them right in the eyes and very lovingly was like, you're so much more than this. And it's okay. It's okay to have these places. It's okay to have these emotions. And tears started to come to their eyes, and my eyes were watering with them. And, but yeah, can you imagine if someone could sit down with you when you're in your ugliest place and say, hey, what's really happening here? I saw that, you punched the wall on the way out of the room. Like, seems like you're really upset. I'm thinking it's probably not about the wall. So we have to learn how to be able to do that for ourselves. Now, usually if we don't have that ability, then we are going to need somebody like a counselor. It doesn't have to be officially a counselor, but somebody who has this capacity within themselves, who can start out in modeling that for us and being that for us externally, right? But the long-term goal is to be able to build up an internal capacity that when we have ugly emotions, we can start to turn towards those places in us and be like, and for me, it'd be like, oh, buddy, what's going on? Like, you're really angry, or you're feeling vengeful, or, overwhelmed and frantic and, wanting to lash out, or, whatever, bazillion examples, right? But like, what's really happening here? And so the invitation, and this is why giving ourselves over to ugly emotions doesn't work, is because the ugly emotion is just the tip of the iceberg, right? And so it is important and it matters, and it is this invitation to go deeper, to be with what is underneath, to not be afraid of the ugly emotion, to be able to say, okay, yeah, I know you want to punch them in the face, but that wouldn't be very kind. Like, I don't care, because they hurt me, blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, wow, so tell me more about how they hurt you, right? Like, we're trying to get at what's underneath. What is underneath? So, I mean, actually, you could do the same thing here with, I think, I'm thinking out loud here. I mean, even with like niceness, like this would be maybe a little bit harder because you got to dig more, but it's like, if we catch ourselves being nice, like if we start to be able to recognize the subtlety of like, I'm being nice, not being kind, like to be able to like turn towards ourselves and be like, what's going on with me? Why am I trying to be so nice? Like, what am I afraid of here? Like, why am I trying to manage this person, manage this relationship in this way? Like, what's going on with me? Like, I actually don't agree with my friend or my partner or whoever about such and such, and I'm afraid of what's going to happen if I let them know that. And so I'm being overly nice to try to hide that and be like, yeah, everything's fine. We're nothing to see here. Move along. So this can be really, I mean, I think it's pretty evident, if you're recognizing any of this in yourself, it's pretty evident that this is really difficult, scary work, which is why we do need support in the process. And we need to have had enough support and internalized enough to be able to start to do this for ourselves outside of the context of having somebody physically with us, right? Because it's so vulnerable. Like my friend was saying, and I could relate to at points in my own therapy of just feeling like, oh, I'm going to be sick. Like, because it just feels so taboo. Like I'm supposed to be this nice person. And like, I have these ugly feelings, like where I don't feel nice right now. Where I'm upset, where I'm disappointed with somebody, where I feel let down, whatever the thing is. But the payoff is multifaceted, but like part of the payoff is that well, for one thing, we become more real in a true way, not just I gave myself over to, ugly emotions to negative emotions or whatever in the name of realness, but still actually I'm not being with the underlying pain and longing and hurt and needs. But actually but realness in the sense of like I had something in my own therapy session this morning where I was like, I just said out loud, like, I'm disappointed. Like, there's some things I'm disappointed about. And I don't even know with some of the things, like, I don't even know if other people did anything wrong or not. I'm just disappointed with how something is going, and like, it's not going how I wanted, how I hoped, and it hits sensitive places in me, and I'm sad about that, and it hurts. And a part of me wants to lash out. A part of me wants to like project and imagine like, you know, this negative thing or that negative thing, and things that I really don't know. Like, I have no idea. And so, yeah, like it, so part of the payoff here is like, there's a realness, there's an honesty. And with that, there's like an unclogging. It's like we become less constipated. But things, now I don't know if I may regret making that analogy, but because I want to say things can move through more readily. So yeah, I mean to think about a digestion analogy, right? Like it doesn't, like, to continue to get nourishment for our system to function properly, right? Or think about like blood flow, right? Like heart attacks happen because valves or like arteries get clogged and the blood can't move, and that causes big problems, you know. Or I think I'm remembering right. Isn't that how a stroke works, right? Like that's like you get a clot in your brain, right? So again, like stuff isn't moving through. So there's this really significant principle about how the human body works and about how the human psyche works, that things being fluid, things being able to move through. So this isn't fluid in the sense of being a jellyfish, right? Like I talk about this in some of my videos about horseback riding, and like some of the things I'm working on and trying to learn to do, and being able to like move with the horses in better ways, be more in sync with them. And so that's not like, if I'm a jellyfish, then I'm going to come off the horse, which just happened. But it's like, but if I'm rigid, well, I also will come off the horse eventually. Or if I don't, at the very least, it's going to be really unpleasant for me and the horse, because it's like, you know, we're just, you know, bouncing off each other, right? So the goal is to be fluid enough that I'm moving with them, that I'm moving with that motion, and yet poised enough, have enough sort of structural integrity that I'm not flopping about, right? You know, like one of those things in front of stores, those air thingies that, you know, you know, right? Like, so it's like I need to maintain my structural integrity, but I also need to be flexible and adaptable and really moving with the horse. And so it's the same thing with our bodily fluids, right? Like it's the same thing with our emotions. Ideally, right, we have an emotion, we can face it, be totally honest with it, with ourselves about it, and even, you know, acknowledge it to others if need be, right? Because it's like, hey, I am in a really foul mood, like I'm really angry about some things. There's nothing you need to do about that or can do about that. It's just I'm working through it, but I just want to acknowledge it, say it out loud, because you're gonna feel it. It's in the room right now. And I may have things I need to apologize for with you later about how I'm handling things. I'm trying to not take that out on you, but this is where I am, right? So it's like I'm not giving myself a pass to act badly, but I'm also just being real about like, you know, I'm messy sometimes, right? Like we all are. That's just life. And so by doing that, ideally then I can feel it in the moment, be with it, ride the waves of it, have it move through, and then in a true sense, I can freaking move on, right? Doesn't mean I'm not going to feel that feeling again. You know, I very well may. Like some feelings, you know, and some difficult feelings we're going to feel repeatedly over the rest of our lives. But the more that we can work with them and just ride the waves of that, not being overtaken by it, right? And not like fighting it, or trying to hold back the water, right? But in this, you know, more grounded way, Like it just, yeah, it moves through much faster, and it's much less energy expended. Where we don't get sort of these weird, coping behaviors coming out, things coming out sideways, right? Like, so it just, all around, it just feels better. But it is hard, right? Because it's this, to do this kind of work, like we have to let go of being nice. And that's really scary. And as I was saying to my friend, as they very much resonated with, and I was speaking from my own experience, like we're so much like a little child that's like holding on to like, like our, thing we found in the dirt that's like, poisonous or whatever. And we're like, no, don't make me take God, no. And it's like, come on, buddy, you need to let go of it. Come on. You're like, hey, but it's my favorite and I can't live without it. And it's like, we just feel like we're going to die at points, right? It feels so psychologically difficult. And there's so much grief there, and shame and loss and confusion. And we often have to kind of go through cycles of this, right? Like it's difficult to kind of totally work through this all in one go, because depending on how deep it is, how long we've been doing this, how early this started, like it can feel really, really cataclysmic. It can feel like quite the crisis to let go of this, to let go of our niceness. And again, this isn't about being a jerk. This is about getting real and getting honest. So that we can actually learn how to be genuinely kind, how to more genuinely and honestly and purely love one another, and love ourselves, and love the parts of ourselves. So yeah, I hope that if you are resonating with some of this, I hope that you can find some courage to find a person, or if you already have a person you're working with, some kind of counselor, mentor, figure, to move towards these places, because they matter. There are parts of you, and even though they can feel ugly, and even though they can want to act badly, and probably do act badly at times, like they still need love. They need some limits on their behavior, right? Again, like a child having a temper tantrum. But they need to be known, and they need help. These parts of us need our help, and they need outside help in being able to make sense of what is really driving this. Like what's underneath these ugly feelings. Because these ultimately can become some of our greatest gifts, and they can lead us to such treasures inside of us if we can stay with them, if we can continue and persist in the work. And in the long run, this can really opens us up to a greater capacity for peace and joy and connection with one another. Well, until next time, peace be with you.